Okay, tonight we are reading Captain Underpants and the Terrifying Return of Tippy Tinkletrousers. Big book. Alright, that's enough. Hi everybody. The last time you saw us, we were headed to jail for the rest of our lives. Then something even worse happened. Check out this comic book to get caught up on our story so far. The Super Top Secret Truth About Captain Underpants by George and Harold. Once upon a while ago, there was two cool kids named George and Harold. We the bomb pops, me too. They had a really mean principal named Mr. Krupp. Blah, 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 and stuff. So they hypnotised him. You will obey us. Okay. You are now Captain Underpants. Groovy. Mr. Krupp really thought he was Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la! And he got in lots of trouble. One time, Dr. Diaper kidnapped him. Ha, ha, ha! And George and Harold had to save him. Booyah! Bye-bye! I'm free! Rats! Another time, he almost got ate up by some talking toilets. Yum, yum, eat 'em up. And George and Harold had to save him again. Eat this! Cafeteria food. Blech. I am a hero! And then this other time, a bunch of zombie nerds attacked. Captain Underpants drank some superpower juice, glug glug, and he got superpowers. Then he saved George and Harold. It's about time. Here's the worst part. Whenever Mr. Krupp hears someone snap their fingers, blah, 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 snap, he turns into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la. And whenever Captain Underpants gets water on his head, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. A blah, blah, blah. So whatever you do, don't snap your fingers at Mr. Krupp. Seriously, dudes. Ex-nay on the snapping say. Pig Latin. And if you ever see Captain Underpants saving the world, hide the H2O. Quick, nobody pour water on his head. Treehouse Comics, Inc. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the right with a tie and a flat top. Harold is the one on the left with a t-shirt and a bad haircut. Remember that now. When our last adventure ended, George and Harold were being escorted to jail. The police had discovered surveillance photos showing the two boys robbing a bank with Captain Underpants. Of course, we all know that George, Harold and Captain Underpants were innocent. It was their evil twins who had robbed the bank. But the police hadn't bothered to read the last book, so they really didn't know what was going on. And all they knew was that George and Harold looked a lot like the two kids in the surveillance photos. So the cops yelled, "Freeze!" and grabbed George and Harold and then told the two boys of their terrible fate. Suddenly, a gigantic pair of robotic pants appeared from out of nowhere. The terrifying Tippy Tinkletrousers emerged from the zipper, zapped the cops with an ice ray. Zzzt. Tippy Tinkletrousers. And chased George and Harold and their two pets, Crackers and Sulu, far into the cavernous depths of the lower right-hand corner of page 17. If you read our last epic novel, you know that this is how the story ended, but that's not how it was supposed to end. You see, Tippy and his giant ice ray zapping robotic trousers weren't supposed to be there at all. They had come from the future and rudely interrupted what was supposed to happen. Unfortunately for Tippy, the simple act of sending himself backward through time would end up being a terrible, terrible mistake. A mistake that would ultimately lead to the destruction of our entire planet, more or less. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2. The Banana Cream Pie Paradox. Time machines are awesome, there's no doubt about it, but they can also be very dangerous. It's possible that a person could go back in time and accidentally change one little thing, that one teeny tiny itsy bitsy thing could profoundly affect the future. This is what scientists refer to as the banana cream pie paradox. Imagine, if you will, that a scientist from the year 2020 baked a banana cream pie using bananas that he had harvested from his very own banana tree. Let's suppose now that the scientist took his banana cream pie into a time machine which zapped him and the pie back to the year 1936. Now imagine that the scientist stepped out of the time machine and accidentally tripped, smashing his pie into the face of a lady sitting at a fancy garden party. Now suppose that the lady jumped up angrily, wiped a handful of gooey banana cream pie filling from her face and threw it at the scientist. The scientist ducked, causing the banana to go smack into the face of a gentleman standing nearby. A waitress pointed at the gentleman and laughed. The angry gentleman wiped the goo from his face and smooshed it into the waitress's face. "Well," said the waitress, "I've never been so insulted in my life. You ought to get out more, lady." "Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk, nyuk," said a wise guy. "Why don't you mind your own business, bird brain?" said another man. And as he poked the wise guy in the eyes, the wise guy fell backward and landed onto the scientist's banana tree, which was just a tiny sapling in 1936. The tiny banana tree snapped in half and died. Now, if the scientist's banana tree died in 1936, it could never grow up to produce bananas. Therefore, the scientist would not have had the main ingredient he used to make his banana cream pie in the year 2020. Consequently, the banana cream pie could not exist. Tell that to these guys. Many scientists throughout the centuries have pondered the banana cream pie paradox and have come to the conclusion that people should be really careful when they use time machines, because one simple change in the past could affect the future and even possibly destroy our entire planet. Chapter 3. Our real ending to our last adventure. As we already saw in Chapter 1, George and Harold were being taken to jail when Tippy Tinkletrousers travelled backward through time and interfered. But what would have happened if he hadn't showed up? What was supposed to happen before Tippy so rudely interrupted him? Well, sit back and get comfortable because you're about to find out.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
The police chief and his right-hand man, Officer McWiggly, handcuffed George and Harold and shuffled them into the back of their police car. "You've got the wrong guys," cried Harold. "We didn't rob that bank." "It's true," said George. "That bank was robbed by our evil twins from an alternate universe." "Yeah, right," said Officer McWiggly. "If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that excuse." On the way to jail, the cops drove past Mr. Krupp, who was busy cleaning up the soggy toilet paper in his yard. "Hey," shouted the police chief, "that's the guy who robbed the bank with these kids." "Let's get him," yelled Officer McWiggly. The cops slammed on the brakes, grabbed Mr. Krupp, handcuffed him and threw him into the back seat of the car along with George and Harold. Their trials lasted for nearly a year, and George, Harold and Mr. Krupp were all found guilty. They were each sentenced to 10 years of incarceration. This unusually harsh sentence was tough on George and Harold, but it was really hard on Mr. Krupp. Chapter 4. Life in the Big House. Poor Mr. Krupp. He had been locked up at the Piqua State Penitentiary for months, and the life of a jailbird just wasn't his thing. All day long he had people bossing him around. He ate nutritionally deficient, horrible-tasting meals in a filthy cafeteria. He got harassed constantly by a bunch of meat-headed bullies, and he spent his days doing menial busy work in an overcrowded, poorly ventilated sweatshop. Mr. Krupp was told when to eat, when to read, and when to exercise. He even had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. He was constantly bombarded with pointless rules, ridiculous discipline, random searches, metal detectors, security cameras, and pharmaceuticals designed to make everyone compliant and docile. It was a lot like being a student at Jerome Horowitz in elementary school, except that the prison had better funding. Mr. Krupp grumbled angrily to himself as he stomped around the prison courtyard on a gloomy autumn afternoon. In the centre of the courtyard, a giant green tarp shielded everyone's eyes from something large and tall that was being built in honour of Piqua State Penitentiary's upcoming 10-year anniversary. Everyone assumed it was some kind of statue, but since nobody had seen this top-secret project, not even the warden, nobody was quite sure what it was. "I'm sick of this place," Mr. Krupp muttered to himself. "Everyone's always telling me what to do. If one more person gives me another order, I think I'm going to go crazy." "Hey, fatty," shouted a tiny inmate working behind the green tarp. "Give me that hammer over there." Mr. Krupp clenched his fists furiously. "You can't tell me what to do," he screamed. "You're a prisoner, just like I am." "I most certainly am nothing like you," said the tiny prisoner. It was Tippy Tinkletrousers, who was serving an 8-year sentence for attempting to take over the planet with intent to enslave humanity. Mr. Krupp rolled up his sweaty sleeves and stomped over to the pint-sized prisoner. He eyed Tippy up and down. Tippy eyed Mr. Krupp up and down. "Hey!" Mr. Krupp shouted. "You look kind of familiar." "I agree," said Tippy, "but I can't quite remember where I've seen you before." The two men walked in slow circles around each other. "Well, whoever you are," Mr. Krupp said, "you've got no business bossing me around." "I'll have you know," said Tippy, "that I'm more than just a regular prisoner. I'm an artiste. I was hand-picked to build a statue by Warden Schmorden." Oops. Suddenly, a rotund little man peeped his bulbous, dandruff-speckled head out from behind the green tarp. "Did somebody just say my name?" he asked excitedly. It was Warden Gordon B. Schmorden, the guardian and chief jailer of Piqua State Penitentiary. Warden Schmorden was known far and wide for his cruelty and strictness. He once sentenced a prisoner to a year of solitary confinement just for ending a sentence with a preposition. Warden Schmorden was undoubtedly the most maniacally evil person anyone had ever met, but the injurious jailer had one fatal weakness. He was easily flattered, and that weakness was exactly what Tippy Tinkletrousers used to talk his way into making a giant statue of Warden Gordon Borden Schmorden to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of Piqua State Penitentiary. "Just leave everything to me," said Tippy at the start of the project, "and I'll construct the most stunningly handsome statue you've ever seen." "Really?" said the warden. "Can you make it extra tall and extra handsome?" "Of course," said Tippy. "Wonderful, wonderful," cried Warden Schmorden. "How soon can you get started?" "As soon as I get my supplies," said Tippy. He handed the warden a carefully written list of tools and materials. "Hey," said Warden Schmorden, looking over the list, "why do most of these supplies come from the Mad Scientist mini-mall? What do you need an emulsifying saucerlaflange inhibitor for? And what kind of statue uses reverse somnambulating tracto McFractionizer?" "You know," said Tippy, "I don't tell you how to run the prison, so don't tell me how to build my statues." "Fair enough," said Warden Schmorden.